It all started with the fact that after reading the novel in the evening, the girl fell asleep, and in the morning found herself in the body of the main character. She began to hear some sounds, and as soon as she opened her eyes, she saw a lot of strangers in front of her, all of whom started rushing her somewhere. The assistants don't understand why the mistress reacts so strangely to them, and looks at them as if she is seeing them for the first time. At one point, the girl couldn't help herself, and decided to ask why they all called her princess. Because just moments ago she was just a normal student in her room. As soon as she walked up to the mirror and saw the gorgeous golden hair, fair skin, and blue eyes, it all made sense to her at once. The girl has entered another world, and this is her new body, which has nothing in common with the previous one. She just can't believe her eyes, because she thought this kind of thing was only possible in fairy tales or fantasy movies. At this point, the assistants began to discuss her reaction, as the mistress was acting as if she had lost her memory. Then, the girl came up to them and asked why she was wearing that dress and what she needed that bouquet of flowers for. Because she replied that it was for a wedding. She became very curious as to who was having the wedding, but instead of answering, the assistant asked why the lady was acting so strangely. Because today will be her wedding, for which it is high time to begin preparations. But not only the girl woke up too late, she is not in a hurry and does not keep track of time at all. Her husband will be Duke Richard, a wedding that was planned months ago. But unfortunately, the preparations took too long. The princess remembered the name very well, for she had just finished reading the last chapter yesterday. As she remembers it, Richard is the father of the weird bunny princess in the novel, and he's also a werewolf who goes out every night and turns into a wolf no matter what the circumstances. The princess becomes very nervous, because she has no idea what awaits her and what she will have to face after marriage. The first thing to do is to figure out who she is. The girl's not a bunny character, and she's definitely not one of those maids. Fortunately, she remembered that originally, one of the maids had said the name Gloria. It was hard to imagine what would have happened if the girl had not remembered that, for asking her own name would have been too much. Gradually, he began to have some recollections from the story, and only after a few minutes of everything became clear. She is the fourth princess of the kingdom who becomes a duchess, and also the stepmother of the main character, Rabbit. It's just unbelievable. But she has to deal with it anyway, because it's impossible to become someone else or change the character. At this point, she wondered if she was in this body, where its original owner had gone, though I guess it didn't matter now. Meanwhile, Gloria finally leaves her room, and she still has hope that it was all a dream. A suspiciously realistic and very unusual dream. She saw her lover, that there was no going back. She would have to accept and get used to her new life. Richard heard her footsteps, turned around and started looking at his fiancée. The guy has no idea that there is a complete stranger in that body. Gloria saw him and started to get very nervous when she read the story. She never thought that in reality, he would turn out to be much more handsome. She felt awkward, like he'd noticed something and realized he wasn't the real Gloria. Everything looks so fabulous and unusual that so far, the girl takes it as a very realistic dream. In front of her is a real leader of the wolf clan. All girls fall in love with him at first sight. There is not a single one who would not dream of marrying him. The bride reflected that if this was indeed a dream, it was a very good dream. She even wished it wouldn't end, at least for the rest of this day. The guy took her hand and still hasn't said a single word. He continues to be silent. You can't even tell if he's nervous or not, because of the incredibly realistic nature of it. Gloria keeps thinking that sooner or later, she will return to her old world. Until then, she'll enjoy the beautiful faces and beautiful life that everyone dreams about. After a while, the girl went back to her room, changed her clothes, and started to get ready for bed. A whole night passed. She woke up again in the same place and realized that it wasn't a dream at all. Moreover, Richard was gone as soon as she woke up. In the original story, Gloria despised and gradually began to hate people like her husband, because in the morning he just left, which made her very angry. It was as if he ignored yesterday's event and showed how indifferent he really was to her. At this point, the girl decided not to think about bad things and started to get ready for breakfast. She was very hungry, and because of this, her mood was beginning to deteriorate with every passing second. The Duchess called her assistant and asked her to cook something delicious for her. They were very quick with the request. and began to escort her to a special room. The palace is so huge that at first, Gloria will have a very hard time navigating the place. After a while, she gets tired of not getting any alone time. She tried to speed up and make the maids lose sight of her, but unfortunately it was no use. They were more attentive and immediately caught up with her, but the girl does not yet suspect that this is not all the difficulties that await her. At some point she starts to hear strange noises, as if something is moving and running at her with great speed. The Duchess looked around and barely noticed some small creature looming over her. Because of the speed, she didn't realize who it was and couldn't react in time. It turned out to be a small rabbit. He jumped right on top of her and somehow clawed at her face before Gloria realized what had just happened. In just a few seconds, too much happened. Even the maids didn't expect to be attacked by that little rabbit at that moment. The first thing the girl saw in front of her was his eyes. She doesn't understand if she should be afraid now or the other way around. To admire this beautiful creature, for as yet, it is difficult to understand the purpose of his pouncing upon her. Just a few seconds later, she started screaming very loudly and asked for someone to get the creature out of her face. Gloria began to test her head very hard, hoping the rabbit would unhook itself and run back out again. The girl couldn't help herself and couldn't control herself, because she wasn't used to being attacked by an unfamiliar rabbit since morning. Since she doesn't know what to expect from him or what his intentions are, it's no wonder she had that reaction. That's probably how anyone would react if they were her. Afterward, Gloria took it in her hands and began to look at it. The rabbit seemed to be as frightened as she was. And then, surprisingly, the moment the helpers continued to be afraid of him, the girl recognized him as a very cute animal. She really liked that rabbit, despite what happened a few minutes ago now. She's not scared at all. She began to look at him from different sides, touching him, and tried to see if he was good or evil. Gloria had never seen or held such a creature before. The girl even forgot that just now, screamed and was afraid of it. She fell in love with him at first sight and became very happy that he lived in the house, because from now on she would be able to see and walk with him every day. Immediately afterwards, the maids for some reason wanted to call Mrs. Isabella and tell her all about it. Although the mistress didn't ask them to do so, she didn't even look in their direction. So, very curious how she would react to that. In the meantime, Mrs. Isabella had put aside all her business and come to deal with the situation. She didn't explain anything and started to resent it. She obviously didn't like something, but it's not clear what it was. The woman started screaming very loudly and ordered Gloria to come closer to her. After that, she did explain what she didn't like, and it turns out she reads this rabbit as a dangerous creature. So when the helpers saw Gloria take him in her arms and treat him like a cute animal, they became very concerned and decided to ask Mrs. Isabella for help. But the girl still didn't understand why she had to be afraid of that rabbit, because he hadn't done anything wrong. She began to defend him and tried to explain that they were wrong to fear this beautiful creature. It's very interesting what the rabbit did that makes him so feared by the whole staff. Gloria hugged him and promised him that she would protect him from anyone who tried to hurt him or treat him badly. Isabella doesn't recognize Mistress, because before, the real Gloria behaved completely differently. She didn't even pick up that rabbit in her arms. So what they see now raises a lot of questions, because just a few days ago, their real mistress wanted to get rid of him, and now, she can't stop admiring him, and is happy to be able to see him every day. It's like another person in front of them, although in fact, it is. Mrs. Isabella approached the girl and asked at what point she began to like people who turn into animals. In the original story, Gloria hated her husband's daughter, who sometimes turns into a rabbit. The girl began to deny her bad attitude towards the animal, to which the woman asked, "Are there really two Glorias living in this palace?" Otherwise, she just doesn't understand how that's possible. It's the same thing as a villain turning into a good person and denying that he used to be a villain. After that, the woman offered to escort her to her room, as she thought it was possible that the girl might have lost her memory or be a little ill. But the lady ignored this suggestion and answered nothing. She was only interested in the rabbit at the moment. The woman is getting very angry. She seems to be running out of patience. Judging by her look, conflict may be brewing. Just as they started to get close to her and try to do things her way, they all heard some footsteps. The aides immediately stepped away from Gloria and pretended that just now they weren't trying to get her to do anything. They turned around and saw Richard in front of them. He heard their conversation and decided to come closer. The guy asked what was going on here. Everyone looked at him and were afraid to say anything back. There was an awkward silence that made him even angrier. He decided to hang in there and waited for that moment to finally be told something. His wife was the first to dare to do it. She said she just took pity on the rabbit and held it in her arms. Richard sees his baby in her arms for the first time. He is genuinely surprised and can't believe his eyes. Because of it, even he stopped talking because he doesn't know how to react. Then he turned to his kid and it turns out the rabbit's name is Emily. He wanted to hold her. As suddenly, the rabbit turned away from him and made it clear that he wanted to stay in his stepmother's arms. He was much more comfortable with her. Even Gloria didn't expect the child to refuse to go to his father and stay with the man who only recently hated him more than anything in the world. He must have sensed that something had changed, and in this body, there was a very kind and caring girl. Emily looked at her with those eyes like she was asking her not to give her to anyone and keep her. It was really cute. Gloria smiled and was very happy, and also she is curious to see the reaction of the people around her. Because they have no idea what the real reason for the change is, they'll probably never know. She asked to keep this rabbit with her, at least for a few days. Such words no one expected to hear. You could see it very well on their faces. Eventually, everyone dispersed. The girl began to keep a close eye on Emily, and didn't let her off her back for a second. She took her to breakfast, and as soon as they sat down at the table, the helper brought 2 carrots and a piece of steak. As soon as Gloria started to cut the carrot into small pieces to make it more convenient for the rabbit, she looked in his direction and was very much surprised. Emily grabbed a dish that wasn't hers and started eating that steak, looking at it. It's impossible to believe that a rabbit could choose that over carrots. He began to eat this dish with great appetite and did not even look around, because the steak is really very tasty. In the end, the girl is left without food. She has 2 carrots in her hands, which she can't eat. She obviously didn't imagine her breakfast that way. But since she had no other choice, she had to eat a breakfast of vegetables. Gloria wondered if this meant that such creatures, even in an animal body, ate the same things as humans did as well. Most likely these creatures only change in appearance. Surprisingly, even as a rabbit, appetite and food preferences remain the same. After breakfast, it was time to relax and enjoy the silence. The helpers prepared everything necessary for this, and even created an incredible atmosphere. But instead of arranging rest and relaxation for herself, first of all, the girl thought of the rabbit. She decided to bathe it and brush its teeth. But looking at him, it's clear that he's against the idea. He doesn't like water, especially when there's so much of it and it's hot. Unlike him, Gloria was inspired by the idea, and against all odds, she decided she had to do it. She really wants to take care of him and feel like a caring mom. Even though she's a stepmother, the girl will treat him like he's her own child. She petted him and promised him that they would definitely be friends. She had no intention of doing anything bad to him, and really wanted him to stop being afraid of her. Gloria took him in her arms, and at that moment, the rabbit's harms and accidentally scratches her cheek. It left a small wound. But in the first few seconds, it felt as if the wound was too serious. It started to hurt so much that the girl couldn't even open her eyes. She could hardly bear the pain, but surprisingly, she didn't chastise or resent it. Gloria realizes that it's very hard for him to start trusting, so she's willing to be patient and wait it out for as long as it takes. When suddenly, just a few seconds later, she changed her mind and started to catch up with him. It might look like she wanted to get back at him, when really she just wanted to hold him in her arms again. The rabbit took it a little differently and started to run away. He became wary and distrustful of her. After a few minutes, eating became very hard to run. Gloria didn't think she had such poor physical fitness. She stopped and motioned for him to come over, the girl still intentionally brushing his teeth. It seems the girl definitely doesn't plan on giving up. At this point, she put her head down and decided to rest for a while. Feeling safe, the rabbit approached her and touched his hand. He felt guilty and, for certain, decided to apologize when suddenly the girl looked at him with a look like she was purposely pretending to be tired. It was like a little trap. Emily was beginning to hope that she wouldn't get caught again and be forced to go into the water and brush her teeth. Gloria caught him and said that now he would not go anywhere from her. These words were heard even by some of the maids who were tidying up in the next room. Mrs. Isabella was with them, and she still thinks of how a man who wanted to get rid of a rabbit suddenly began to love and care for it. In her opinion, it's just not possible. So she'd really like to know the answer to that question and see if she's right. Before, Princess Emily trusted and was only ever around Mrs. Isabella, so the woman really wants to get to the bottom of this. Because of her bad mood, she began to resent even the maids. The woman began to look for faults in their work and shouted loudly. And after that, she ordered them to do everything they could to find out the truth and get the rabbit back. Meanwhile, the girl had already managed to bathe the rabbit. She began to apologize to him and explained that it was necessary to do so. She warned that he would have to put up with some rules from that day forward, such as brushing his teeth in the morning every day. To interest Emily, she offered him a very interesting idea. If the rabbit brushed his teeth every day, she would grant his every wish. He immediately looked her way and thought about it. It was really interesting. No one had ever offered him a compromise like this before. Usually he was just forced and not asked for his opinion. Gloria gave him some time to think and decide, and afterward offered to have dinner together. Since the rabbit isn't running away, it means he's in agreement. At least he doesn't have a disgruntled look or anything like that. The girl took him in her arms and started hugging him. She was very happy that they were able to be friends, and he had forgotten the way she had treated him before. Which means that Emily has been able to forgive her stepmother. Of course, it's very hard for her to start trusting her, but every time she does, she's starting to get better at it. Unfortunately, since she can't talk, it's hard to know what she's thinking at any given moment. But so far, there's no major problems with it, other than a little hurt and a lot of speed when he tries to get away from it. But even that is not too much of a problem, because in this way she can easily and immediately understand what he agrees to and what he does not agree to. After a while, Gloria found herself in some unfamiliar place, with no people around and nothing to see. She starts looking around and doesn't understand what's going on. She felt very lonely, and with each passing second, a sense of dread began to emerge, for what would happen next was completely unknown. No one warned her about it or told her what to do in such a situation. Since the girl is in a world where nothing is impossible, it remains only to observe what is happening and hope that nothing bad and terrible awaits her. At one point, she saw an unusual and very large tree in front of her, as it was incredibly beautiful. For a few minutes, she managed to forget about her fear. After that, out of nowhere, some subtle and very beautiful butterflies started appearing. She tried to touch one of them, and immediately after that they all started flying away from her at the same time. As soon as they got to a safe distance, Gloria suddenly heard someone's voice. She was very scared, but at the same time, she was very curious to know what would happen next. Someone greeted her, and surprisingly, this someone addressed her by name. Gloria began to stare at one point and wait for something unknown. Then that incredibly pleasant and soothing voice said they were really looking forward to her. After a while, she noticed that this voice was coming from one of those butterflies. He said that things had gotten really bad since she disappeared. When suddenly, this time, she was offered some kind of contract. Also, only she could do it. Gloria asked who she was talking to and what kind of contract we were talking about, because until she was given an answer, she wasn't going to agree to anything. The butterfly replied that if the girl made a pact with them, she could use their power. They were very willing to cooperate with her. It turns out they chose her for a reason, several reasons, so her consent is very important to them. Gloria asked her question again and asked who she was talking to, and this time, she was finally answered. They, the butterflies of the world tree. This is the tree she is now looking at. They say that if need be, they can give her some time to make a final decision, and after that, went on to say that the tree is the symbol of this world, the root and strength of all beings. The girl was afraid to make a decision, for it was not known whether she would regret it or not, for so far she knew little about it. After a few seconds, she thought about what she wanted and decided to ask if she could take the opportunity to protect Emily. Butterflies replied that of course, with her powers, she would have no limitations. She could do anything she pleased. To make sure that the girl did not hesitate and agreed, they promised that after the agreement, she would become a very important person in this world. Eventually, Gloria agrees. A lot of butterflies gather around her, and they all start thanking her for her cooperation. Right after that, she found herself back in her room, on the same bed she had fallen asleep on. The girl opened her eyes, and couldn't tell if it was a dream or something else. She began to stare at the ceiling and seriously wondered what that could mean, because after a normal sleep, she had never had such a feeling before. The girl remembers exactly that she was offered some kind of contract and talked to butterflies. Surprisingly, she was not confused by anything. She is no longer surprised that a lot of butterflies offer her something like that. Very interested in what she's going to do next, because most likely, in today's day, there must be some clue or sequel to it. As suddenly, the girl notices that it's too noisy outside. She decides to call a helper and find out what's going on. A few moments later, one of the maids came up to her. The mistress allowed her to enter her room, and afterwards asked why it was so noisy outside. Because she couldn't get a good night's sleep and had to wake up too early. Turns out everyone's been actively looking for Emily. She's been missing since this morning. No one can find her. Gloria got herself together very quickly, went outside and started looking for the rabbit since no one can find it for hours. It means it's either hidden on purpose or someone is hiding it. There could be no other option, Gloria thought. Where could he be? But so far she has no options at all. At one point she heard Isabella screaming. The woman was so worried she even cried. Although judging by how badly she wanted the rabbit, it's possible she knows exactly where it is now. Perhaps she was only pretending to be very frightened and did not know where he might be. Gloria asked if that was often the case, to which the assistant replied that when Emily was in a bad mood, she sometimes wants attention, but it was very rare. There must be some other reason. At this moment, the girl remembers something else. Very often when the anniversary of the mother who gave birth to the child is approaching, the rabbit often disappears somewhere and no one can find it. This is one of the reasons why it is nowhere to be found. It turns out that Chloe, the mother who gave birth to Emily, was the woman whose freedom was taken away. The girl heard that when Emily was 4 years old, her mom died. Gloria suggested that perhaps that was why the girl was constantly in rabbit form and not returning to her normal human form. She felt sorry for the rabbit and wanted to find him as soon as possible, because he must need some support and help. Emily has done so well that she can't be found for more than 5 hours. It's been almost half a day now. To begin with, the girl decided that it was necessary to examine the garden very carefully. As the rabbit was small, it could easily be overlooked and passed by. At that moment, her husband Richard suddenly appeared next to her. He appeared so inconspicuously that the girl was even a little afraid of him. They looked at each other, but as usual, the guy didn't even say hello. He didn't say a single word, as if he was purposely continuing to ignore it. Gloria tried to talk to him, but he never seems to be able to wait for any reciprocation at all. But even in such situations, when he doesn't notice her and behaves too disrespectfully, the girl doesn't stop admiring his appearance. She wants to look into his eyes as long as possible, but unfortunately, of the two of them, only the girl admires her partner. The guy doesn't seem to have any feelings for her. He just sees her as someone he knows and lives in the same house with. Each time she gets more and more curious about what the real Gloria did that her own husband doesn't like. It's very strange that they recently had a wedding, and even on that day, there was no initiative from him. It was like he was forced to do it. At some point she got tired of being silent, remembered Emily and decided to keep looking, when suddenly, some miracle happened. The guy said the first word since she married him. The girl even thought that she had just heard it, because she was sure it couldn't be like that. She just kept walking on and looked around carefully, because the rabbit could be anywhere. At this point, the guy spoke again and asked her to stop. In response, since Gloria was a little offended, she decided to pretend like she didn't hear anything. But just a few seconds later, she couldn't bear to ignore that beautiful voice. Gloria turned around and asked how she could help him, because most likely if the guy talked, it was definitely for a reason. He moved closer to her and tried to touch her hair, the guy's behavior becoming too unlike what he was before. Gloria doesn't understand why he stopped her, because just now, this man was ignoring her on purpose. She looked at him and still agreed to wait from the moment he explained what he needed to do. Turns out he only did it to remove some petal from her hair. Now I see why he wanted to touch it. The girl thought it was most likely just an excuse to start a conversation. Only it was unknown which one. It was very interesting. She was a little embarrassed and thanked for the attention because she didn't know how else to respond to it. Surprisingly, the man who, after marriage, even eats breakfast and rests separately, began to show interest in her. Was the girl so different from the real Gloria that he was beginning to like it? For it was more likely that he really did see something new in her. If you think back to the situation when she asked to keep the rabbit and said nice things about him, maybe that's when he started treating her better. probably when the real Gloria was against it and wanted to kick the rabbit out. From that time on, they started having relationship problems. So there's a chance that things will get better very soon, and he'll love this girl again. Because at the very least, she loves Emily very much and will be able to take care of her like a real mom. After that, they said goodbye, and the girl continued to look for the rabbit again. She explained that she was very busy. Emily might be in danger, so one must not forget about her for a moment. As suddenly, he turned to her again and asked if he could ask just one question. He promised it wouldn't take long. He wondered if Gloria really wanted to find his baby, and that's why she refused to talk to him for so long. The girl answered that he understood everything correctly, because at any moment, something dangerous could happen to her, and it would be very bad if no one knew about it, or find her too late. She's sure she can't stop for a second because things could be a lot more serious than they seem. Very strange. But even though he's her father, the guy takes the time to look for her. Gloria doesn't understand how that's possible. Because he should be the one to start looking for her first thing in the morning, and not be distracted by conversations like this that don't help the search. As suddenly, Richard asked her another question that was very different from the previous one. The girl never could have thought he would ask it. He wondered why the girl was always avoiding him, although in fact it was the other way around. He wasn't interested in her life and was always avoiding her. The girl doesn't even know what to say to that, because she's the one who should be asking him questions like that. She felt very uncomfortable, because she really didn't know why he was interested. Gloria had often tried to come up and ask him something, and he pretended not to notice her. So, she decided to discreetly change the subject and talked about his daughter, and reminded him that the rabbit might be in danger. Besides, the longer they discuss it and do nothing, the worse the consequences could be. Anything could have happened to the child. No one knows if she's even on the palace grounds or who's involved. She begins to resent the fact that even she, being her stepmother, is more concerned about the child than her birth father, who should be the one who should be most concerned. He did not even try to do anything, and what's worse, with his behavior, the guy only distracts the girl from the investigation, in which he himself does not take any part, which is very strange. Richard all this time was suspiciously calm and not worried about anything. Gloria is trying to understand why he is so calm and worried less than everyone else, because it should be the other way around. As suddenly, he looked at her with a look like something supernatural had happened. He was really impressed by something. At that moment, the girl heard a very familiar sound. She started to look around and saw those very same butterflies. One of them flew right up to her face and addressed her by name, most likely needing to know her final answer about the treaty. The girl started smiling and said she was very happy to see them. Turns out they had flown in to help out. Gloria made sure that that time she wasn't dreaming. They were really offering her a very important contract. She asked how they could help her and how they knew she was in trouble. She was very curious to know what their powers were, to which the butterfly replied that they could go anywhere, and also able to hear a person's thoughts. That's very interesting. Gloria wondered how she could use this opportunity, being for sure someone to find for them would not be a problem. And that's not all. The butterfly told me that they can make the earth fertile by bringing flowers and fruit. And also, they can animate absolutely anything, so there's no problem they can't solve. The girl asked why such marvelous creatures had contracted with her. Since she didn't think she had a very good reputation, the butterfly replied that they just sensed it, and trusted your intuition, which has never been wrong before. The lady didn't know how much of it was true. All she asked was that they help her find Emily first. The second the butterflies gave her a temporary ability, Gloria immediately looked up and saw a rabbit in a tree. It was simply unbelievable, except that he'd climbed too high. But really, it's not that big of a problem now that it's found. Emily jumped onto the highest branch, and all the while, she didn't make a single sound. Did she really want to be alone so badly that she had to choose a place like this to be alone? Gloria had an idea, because maybe Emily was just walking and wanted to climb a tree, and when she did, it was too scary to come down. Though if that's really true, Emily could have called for help or screamed loudly. The rabbit looks scared at the same time, but at the same time, it will do it on purpose to get attention. The stepmother got tired of waiting and asking him to come down. She started yelling even louder, and said that if the rabbit didn't come down now, she would leave him here until tomorrow. She offered him to jump and promised him that she could catch him. The rabbit did not resist and immediately began to prepare to jump. He was very frightened, for he had never done such a thing before. The greatest height he had ever been at was in someone's arms. So when I had to jump out of a huge tree, it wasn't as easy as it looked from the outside. In the end, the rabbit changed his mind about jumping, and in order not to wait long, the girl decided to climb to the heights herself and save the child. She asked him to stay where he was and not to go any higher. She said she had a lot of experience climbing trees during nature walks. I wonder how she'll manage to get back down, since it's likely the two of them could be trapped together. After a few minutes, she managed to get to the right branch, and Emily seems to be saved. The rabbit calmed down and stopped being nervous, because now he is not alone. And next to his stepmother, finally, you cannot worry about anything. She will take care of everything. They didn't linger long at altitude. Gloria put the rabbit on her shoulder and asked him to hold on as tightly as possible. They started to go downstairs, and at some point her foot suddenly tripped. The girl was no longer in control of the situation, and together they began to fall with great speed. She did not even notice how it could happen, for she was trying to descend as gently as possible. At that moment, she began to think only of keeping the child out of harm's way. She wouldn't feel as sorry for herself as she did for the rabbit. When suddenly, at the last second, the two of them end up in Richard's arms. He reacted in time to catch them. When the guy heard a loud scream, he ran up very quickly, saved his wife and child. Gloria had not at all expected him to be so attentive and dexterous. She was very pleased, for otherwise, one does not want to even imagine what the consequences might have been. After she started to realize the situation, the girl looked at Emily, and after that, asked how she was feeling. The rabbit started to cry a lot. He was very scared and was sure that it would hurt a lot to fall down. His stepmother immediately began to comfort him and said that thanks to his father, they were unharmed. To make sure this situation never happened again, she asked Emily to promise that she would never climb to a great height again. After that, the rabbit finally calmed down and stopped crying and started hugging Gloria like she was his mom. Then, the girl didn't even notice that she stopped paying attention to her savior. She unconsciously started to ignore him and even forgot to thank him. Without saying goodbye, she went to dinner with the child, as if she had forgotten that all this time he had been waiting for some words, or at least attention from her. Gloria took a few steps and finally she remembered him. She felt very uncomfortable. She turned around and looked at him, and began to apologize for her behavior. The girl really didn't see it coming. She explained that it wasn't on purpose. At this point, the guy was already in a bad mood, frustrated and thinking his wife would just walk away and not remember a thing. But a miracle happened. She started making excuses and thanked him for his help. Eventually, he replied that it was his responsibility. So he's very glad he wasn't late and caught them in time to catch them. Gloria was sure he would probably start accusing her of disrespectful behavior. After this, the girl calmed down, for she had avoided conflict, and wished him a good day, and said she was in a hurry to go to dinner. And then she promised to take care of his baby, so Richard could take it easy and go about his business. At this point, he asked her to take her time and told her he had a little proposition to make. Gloria asked what he meant, because before this had never happened before. It turns out he'd like to have dinner with her. Richard promised he wouldn't take offense either way and would accept any decision she made. So far, he's giving a very good impression of himself. Apparently someone trying to improve and show a different side of himself. Her husband started waiting for her answer, and as usual it took a few minutes. Gloria didn't expect such a question and doesn't know how to react to it. She's certainly grateful for his help, but after all the way he's been ignoring and avoiding her, she has no desire to have dinner with him. And besides, it's all a bit of a bad time. The girl apologized and said that unfortunately she had to refuse, and then promised that next time she would gladly accept his offer. She began to feel guilty for after such help, and it was wrong to refuse, especially as her husband had not asked for anything serious. Gloria hopes that her rejection won't affect their future relationship in any way. It's just not the right time right now. Richard replied that let her have it her way. He would look forward to the time when she wanted to spend time together. Of course, he's a bit uncomfortable, but in any case, there's no other choice. Since the girl refused, he won't force her. Immediately afterward, they said goodbye and wished each other a good evening, and then went about their business. The husband and wife had a separate dinner, and surprisingly, It didn't cause any conflict. They still treat each other well, unlike how it was before. Right after dinner, the girl went to her room, changed her clothes, and began to remember today's day. At one point, she seriously considered that she was very tired. Raising and caring for a child wasn't as easy as it seemed. To add to all this, she has a confusing and unstable relationship with her husband, and she still doesn't know how he feels about her. Gloria suddenly remembered, quite by accident, that her husband was a real werewolf. Strange that until now she hadn't wanted to check it out or follow him. And also, she's sick of sleeping alone. Is she up to something and will try to find him? The girl began to have thoughts that something needs to change. She is not satisfied with such a family life, in which it is as if her husband and everything else does not exist. Gloria hid under her blanket and continued to think about the problems that displeased her. At that moment, a rabbit ran up to her, as if it sensed that her stepmother needed it, and it was too hard to be alone. She felt Emily was somewhere nearby and started looking for her on the bed. Because of the light color, she couldn't even spot her the first time she saw her. The rabbit started hopping all over the bed, thus attracting attention. Apparently, he wants to distract the girl from her problems. But for some reason, the girl doesn't get out from under the blanket. She stays there and pretends not to notice him at all. The thing is, at this point, she's starting to come up with a plan to follow her husband. She really wants to see his transformation, but it seems she was so very tired that she decided to postpone the idea to the next day. She said goodnight to the rabbit and they started to rest together. Meanwhile, his assistant came into Richard's office to inform him that the princess had gone to the ladies' room again. The guy immediately realized what he was talking about. He looked at his assistant as if he had heard something that might spoil his plans. The man saw the look in his eyes, and in that second felt guilty, even though he was just doing his job. And it's not my fault that the gentleman may not like some of the information. It turned out that this meant that if the girl was already in the ladies' room, accordingly, she had begun to prepare for sleep and was going to rest. When a guy claims his wife sleeps only after that, he can go out on his own business. Is it at times like this, late at night, that he secretly goes out and does something no one should see? But now, for some reason, he took his time. Richard thought about the girl, for she had changed very suddenly and noticeably. He plans to get to know her better, because he doesn't understand the reason why a person has changed so much in a short time. Not long ago, she was a villain, hating Emily and dreaming of getting rid of her, and now she loves her more than anything. In the meantime, the next day has arrived. The weather has been beautiful since the morning, which makes waking up much more pleasant. The girl was immediately in a good mood and inspired to do whatever she had in mind last night. Before she started doing anything, Gloria wanted to lie in bed for a while and not rush into anything like she usually did. She started to look for the rabbit, but for some reason she didn't see it right away. It camouflaged itself very well against the white bed. It's almost impossible to spot it the first time you see it. It's very small and barely noticeable. In the morning, it's especially hard to find it anywhere. This time, she forgot to say good morning to him, and was also too lazy to look for him again. After a while, she managed to get out of bed, clean herself up, and leave the room. Gloria asked for breakfast to be made for her. The helpers handled it very quickly and offered to escort her to a special room. The girl wondered if Emily would take away her food this time. The rabbit was eating too much meat and forgetting about vegetables. As suddenly, walking down the corridor, Gloria saw some little girl. The girl was very surprised and did not understand how this is possible. Is it really? Emily returned to the body of a man. Gloria is so surprised that she doesn't even know how to act so as not to scare her in any way, shape, or form. She began to consider the child's appearance, the beauty of which cannot be described in words. She has very beautiful blonde hair, incredible red eyes, and fair skin. This girl is very different from the other kids. She even has a special energy. At this point, they looked at each other, and unlike the child's calm reaction, Gloria couldn't control her emotions. She knew right away that Emily was definitely Emily because of the energy. She couldn't mistake her for any other child. The girl was expecting this kind of reaction, so not even scared or wanting to go anywhere, she's just amused to watch it happen. Gloria liked this child so much that the girl began to thank fate for the opportunity to raise and be a family with her. The girl immediately realized that they could get along, because at first glance Emily was a very calm and polite child. She should not have any problems with her. After this, and the stepmother remembered breakfast, so she decided to ask if the girl was hungry. Emily replied that she didn't have time to eat breakfast because she was waiting for Gloria, so she would eat breakfast with her. The stepmother was insanely pleased to hear that, and the child's voice was also simply incredible. When suddenly, the girl said she had one request. There was one place she really wanted to go, but since going out there alone is too dangerous, and she needs an adult. Gloria, without hesitation, immediately replied that she would gladly fulfill any of her requests and help her go anywhere she wanted to go. Emily hadn't expected her stepmother to agree to that so easily, and to be sure, she asked the question again, to which the girl replied that there was no problem, and said that if she promises something, she never reneges on her words. Afterward, she took the child's hand and promised that they would visit all the places she wanted or would like to visit. The child can't believe that the stepmother has become so kind, because even her own father has never spent as much time with her as Gloria promises to spend with her. So far, everything is going just perfect. When she starts talking, was sure no one would ever agree to go anywhere with her. Before, adults used to justify it by saying they had too much to do and not enough time to do it. They had a very quick breakfast, took all the essentials with them, and set off after a short time of. They arrived at their destination, which turned out to be some unusual building Gloria had never even heard of before. She wondered very much why the child wanted so badly to be here, and more specifically, inside this building. Is there really something special there that made them have to come all the way out here in the morning? At some point, they noticed some people. They were busy with their business and hardly noticed the guests. The girl only eventually realized that this place was very much like a fencing arena. When she first didn't see it, she was sure that this kid was probably into something else, but clearly not fencing. Emily looks at all these people with such admiration, like she dreams of being one of them. And after that, she looked towards a small store selling delicious desserts. That aroma started to spread everywhere. This place makes very delicious, sweet waffles with chocolate and fruit filling. No wonder no one can pass by this place. Seeing this, Gloria went up to the girl and asked her if she wanted something tasty, for they had not had time to enjoy dessert during breakfast. Emily wasn't used to being offered something like that, so the girl got a little embarrassed and said that if she could, she wouldn't mind a small portion of it. After that, Gloria wanted to make her happy and buy her something special. As some man suddenly approached her, he apologized for distracting her from the conversation. It turns out he recognized the child and came over to remind her that Emily is not allowed to eat such food. It could be very bad for her health. He said that some woman never let her taste sweets. The girl made an unexpected decision. She replied to the man that since that was the case, Emily should enjoy her dessert right now. She ignored his words and decided to do it her way. Gloria doesn't realize how cruel a person has to be to forbid a child to eat sweets. She believes that, at least a little, but it should be in her diet. She ended up buying 2 desserts and asked the kid to ignore anyone else's attention. They began to watch the competition, and gradually, the atmosphere began to get more and more comfortable. After a while, Gloria was shocked that a child could be interested in this. She tried and held back, and decided that since Emily was interesting, she wouldn't be forbidden to do or look at what she wanted to. The girl promised to be with her, and if she changed her mind now and offered to leave, it wouldn't be right. When suddenly she looked over to Emily and saw that she had turned back into a rabbit, and was also getting very angry. She clearly didn't like something very interesting what happened and what affected her transformation. The rabbit got a very aggressive look, as if he really wants to join in, unfortunately, or is unhappy about something. After that, he started acting differently than usual. Gloria doesn't recognize him at all. It's like someone else is in front of her. The girl does not understand what to do in such a situation, because it is not known how it will be better to ask something and try to go home or just sit silently on the sidelines. At some point, the rabbit started to behave too actively. It started hopping around as if it didn't notice anyone around it. Meanwhile, some man announced the start of the contest and asked the semi-finalists to enter the arena, and it's probably got something to do with the rabbit's behavior. First, some man came out, and after that, the host announced that the participant, whom everyone had been waiting for a long time, would soon appear. Some boy appears in the arena. He's much younger, and it's unclear how he can compete with a man 3 times his height. Very interesting what's going on here, because at first glance, there's no way these two could be equal opponents. The host asked to welcome a contestant and called out his name. Jade! Gloria looked at him and couldn't believe her eyes. Just as he appeared in the arena, the rabbit disappeared somewhere. She started looking around for it, but never found it. I'm very curious to see what happens next, because so far it's all too weird and unclear. The girl began to remember the boy's name, and after a while, she even remembered his last name. He has very memorable silver hair that shimmers with a blue hue, as well as golden eyes that are rare to find anywhere else. Despite his age, you can feel the incredible energy from him. You can immediately see that the boy is doing his own thing. He has amazing fencing skills. Now it is clear why this boy is admired by so many people. Hundreds of fans came to the competition. At this point, as she began to admire his skill, Gloria didn't even notice how much time had passed. Even her husband found her. He went up to the guards and asked if they had seen his child with his wife. He immediately told him that a few hours ago, he'd seen Gloria and a little girl in the arena. But instead of helping him find the girl with the baby, he started talking about today's competition. Even though the guy's not interested, he's here to make sure Gloria and Emily are okay. The main thing is that he should be allowed to go inside. Although usually, when the performance has already started, those who are late are not allowed to go in. The guy tried to explain that this was very important to him. He hadn't come to watch the contest at all. And then, he promised that as soon as she went to his wife and child, they'd go straight home. This conversation answered for a long time. The lad had not thought it would be so difficult to get inside the... To speed up the process, the gentleman told the guard that his wife had brought his daughter here and had not told him about it. So it was very important for him to check that everything was in order. And afterward, he explained that she didn't have to ask him anything. Just that today, he especially wanted to see how they were spending their time together. Before, he never forbade anything, and sometimes, he didn't even know where she was. But since his wife has changed beyond recognition, he can't ignore all these situations. He's not just following her to see the baby. He wants to know if she's hiding something from him. Since the girl has a bad reputation, it wouldn't hurt to make sure that someone around her doesn't start a vendetta somewhere. Richard is very confused and can't understand when she had time to change. Her behavior is exactly the opposite of what she used to be like. The girl hated everyone around her and tried to take revenge on everyone she saw in her path. She was a very cruel person, especially towards Emily. It's hard to imagine what the guy thinks of these changes, because all his life, he's known her as a villain. And at some point, it's as if the person has been replaced. If it were him, no one could ignore this situation and everyone would want to know what influenced it. At this point, he has a suspicion that maybe his wife is just faking it, and most likely has some evil plan in mind. And since she's with his daughter all the time, he thinks this plan has to do with her. But whether this is actually the case, it is still necessary to check. He realizes that it is not necessary to make premature conclusions, because it is possible that the person has just changed and wants to correct his mistakes. With her behavior and changes, she's really interested in even... This guy is starting to fall in love with her all over again. Meanwhile, the competition has begun. The boy is ready to take his shot and show his skill. Surprisingly, he's not afraid at all, and unlike his opponent, he behaves very calmly. It's an indication of confidence, and that age is not an indicator of strength and professionalism in any endeavor. His fans have been convinced of this for a very long time, and know that this kid can beat and compete with a man of any age. He has a lot of experience letting go of fear, excitement, and worry. He reacts very skillfully to any attack, even the most unexpected and dangerous. The boy, as if he knows and has learned every action of his opponent ahead of time. It's impossible to believe that at that age, he's one of the best in the business. The girl has no idea how long it might have taken to achieve something like this, when suddenly, unexpectedly, the rabbit returned. It turns out, he was running around the territory all this time and looking at the participants from different angles. The rabbit watches every move very carefully and dreams that in the future, he will become as famous and successful in his business. Gloria doesn't understand how a girl can be into such a sport, as it is very dangerous and time-consuming. When the child asked to go to some place, the girl was sure that it would be some store or a cozy cafe. But she was a little wrong. It wasn't like that. Emily really surprised her. At some point, she got tired of watching and wanted to go home to rest and eat dinner. But it looked like it was going to go on for at least a few more hours. As Gloria had a sudden thought, she suddenly realized that maybe Emily didn't want to do this case at all. She probably just really liked a guy who was good at defeating and attacking his opponent. It remains to be seen if that's actually the case. She likes the second option a lot better. I can see why Emily was so worried and acting out the moment that guy was supposed to show up. Meanwhile, things have come to a close, and the winner will be announced soon, but some viewers already know who will get the win. At the very last moment, some outsiders come into the arena. They look like they want revenge on someone. They're very serious, she's not. All these men fighting against one child. Very interesting how it ends, because it's weird that grown people are trying to prove something to someone and defeat this guy. Rabbit believes that if someone is not satisfied with their own abilities, you need to work on yourself, not to prove something to others. It's unfair of them to come in a big group and challenge one person to a contest, which means they're all so insecure that they're afraid to take turns with him one-on-one. Even a child behaves much more calmly than all these people. Being in a huge company, everyone has fear and an insecure appearance. It's a very good look from the outside. But even so, Jade has no intention of backing down and giving up on the competition. The guy is not afraid of anything, and unlike some people, he is confident. He has reached such a level that even in such situations, he has nothing to worry about. During his training, he has gone through such a thing, after which nothing is scary. He can cope with absolutely any opponent, even if there are several of them. At this point, Emily was a little scared for him. She started to worry and decided not to look in his direction. She hopes he wins, and has no doubt that all these people will regret suggesting the idea to him and coming to this place in the first place. At some point, they got so scared to look at it that they eventually decided to leave and find something to eat, because there are plenty of places around that sell appetizers and desserts. The girl went to the market, and at that moment, two guys offered to help her. Gloria refused at first, but they were so persistent that they didn't go anywhere after all. In that case, she tried to ignore them, and after a while, found some establishment. It offers different drinks and very tasty food, which is perfect for a small snack. At some point, a waitress came up to her and told her that someone wanted to sit with her at the same table. Gloria looked around and saw the same guy that Emily might be in love with looking at her. He smiled at her and confirmed that he would indeed like to have lunch with them. Gloria never thought there were such coincidences. She doesn't understand how he could have noticed her, after all. Just now was in the arena. Plus, they were sitting in the very last row, where it's impossible to see anyone's face, much less remember anyone. Since the girl wasn't very supportive of his hobby, she did her best to make him change his mind and refused to sit next to her. But instead, the guy noticed the rabbit and immediately asked its name. The girl told him that it was actually a girl, and her name was Emily. After that, she started talking to the assistant, and asked how he thought the guy understood what the rabbit was saying to him. I don't know why, but the girl is getting very nervous. She's clearly agitated and wants to get out of here. Finally, the food arrived. It smells very good and looks very appetizing. The girl ordered an unusual dish that she has never tried before. The guy wished her a pleasant appetite, but in return, she could not say the same to him. On the contrary, he made her even more angry. For a few seconds, the girl was no longer in control at all. It was as if she had turned into her old villainous self and for no reason began to hate this boy. No one expected her to react this way, not even herself. But unfortunately, she had already said what she thought. She felt very ashamed of her words, for such behavior could very much spoil her reputation, which was not very good as it was. Surprisingly, the guy remained fairly calm. He didn't react in any way, as suddenly something equally unexpected happened. Emily turned back into a girl. She walked over to the boy and asked him to ignore Gloria. She explained that her stepmother was probably not in a good mood today. Surprisingly, if she thought back to this morning, the girl couldn't even imagine what would happen during the day. She went to a strange place, met this boy, and most importantly, she saw Emily not as a rabbit, but as a person. In the end, the girl couldn't stay here for long and suggested that Emily go home. The girl didn't resist, and agreed after all. Gloria purposely took my hand so that the kid would have less contact with that guy, even though it wasn't really the right thing to do. The boy felt superfluous. Though originally, just wanting to get to know each other, he had no bad intentions whatsoever. The girl is acting too weird. No one understands what exactly she didn't like and why she wants to go home so badly. At one point, she asked Emily how tired she was, and if she had enjoyed the day today. The girl replied that it wasn't bad, but since they left the place too early, she was left a little hungry. So I asked you to hurry home so I could have a proper dinner, without rushing and in peace. They started to leave and didn't even say goodbye to the boy. He was really wondering why he deserved to be treated so badly by Gloria. Surprisingly, Emily didn't ask any questions and decided to pretend that she hadn't noticed anything. She just didn't want to ruin her stepmother's mood even more. She's already too aggressive, which is odd because for the past few days, she's been the sweetest, calmest person she's ever known. When suddenly, the guy decided not to give up, he came over again and asked to walk Emily around a bit. The stepmother did not refuse, for she already realizes that it would be too much. She already showed too much unwanted emotion and said a lot of unnecessary things. As much as she hated to agree to it, for Emily's sake and a good end to this day, she resigned herself to it and remained silent after all. Though, in fact, she was very angry and wanted to yell at him, though to this day, it is not clear why. When suddenly, Gloria didn't even notice the man behind her, who was the guy's adversary. He went to push him, but the kid reacted in time. He immediately started defending and running towards him. He wasn't going to forgive him for that kind of behavior, especially towards people who were just passing through. As soon as the man touched the girl, the guy hit him really hard and pushed him aside. He got very angry and said that this man was now going to regret very much for coming up and daring to do that. Even though the girl said a lot of unnecessary things to him like a true protector, it didn't affect his decision to protect and get revenge on this man. He didn't like him from the start, so he had no choice but to regret what he did. At that moment, Gloria walked over to Emily and tried to make sure the girl didn't see the whole situation, because the child may be very frightened and may not want to go out in the future. When suddenly, Richard stealthily approached them. He had finally found his wife and child, and surprisingly, he came at the right time. Everyone paid attention to him at once, and the conflict stopped at the same second.